where strategy gaming meets good vibes. No stress, just critical moves. Welcome back, everybody, to the Critical Moves podcast. This is episode 20-something, and it feels really good that I can say that because things seem to be going really, really well. Who would have thought we'd have got to 20 episodes? Nuno, Tim, we've made it.
I had full confidence from the beginning.
Did you?
I didn't.
Well, that's because you're a negative ninny. That's why.
Yes, I am. But yeah, so 20 episodes, almost 6 months of critical moves.
I think this is 23.
23, yeah.
23? Bloody hell. So today, joined by my best friends in the world, Tim and Nuno, we're going to be talking about a game which is due to be released called Broken Arrow. This is a mill sim, I guess, which is... Oh, Nuno doesn't think so. So let's have a look at that in a minute. Military simulation RTS game, but Nuno would like to weigh in straight away and tell me why I'm completely wrong.
It is an RTS through and through. I don't think it's a military simulation. It really doesn't try to simulate anything. It just, I would say, a more complex version of the war game series of titles from Fusion. So I don't think it's a simulation. I think it's a decent RTS, but it doesn't try to simulate anything.
Well, let me tell you that you are wrong, because it's not an RTS. It's not a real-time strategy game. There's no resource collection. It's a real-time tactics game.
Okay, let me tell you why you are wrong. So if you think back to Dawn of War, where you would capture resource points and they would generate your allocation system, I forget what it was called, in order for you to be able to create new units. Well, Broken Arrow does the same thing, doesn't it? You capture areas and then that generates resources for you to buy additional units.
Yeah.
The areas the areas mostly are there for victory points, and then there's no base building. There's no it's almost exclusively about tactics.
Okay, right. Let's let's start again. Broken Arrow is a large-scale, real-time modern warfare tactics game. Well done, Tim. Points to you. A unique army-building system and deep unit customization tools allow for endless replayability. With 300 realistic military units and technologies, each battle is more immersive than ever before because it's a military simulation.
I mean, I'm not going to be arguing the definitions of this, but it's not a military simulation. If you want to play realistic simulation about current conflicts, go play Combat Mission Black Sea. That's a simulation. It's just a regular RTS or a regular RTT, I guess, real-time tactics, if you could say so.
But is it regular? I mean, it's grounded very much in realism, isn't it? In terms of the units,
the settings. Yeah. I think I would say it's not realistic, but it's a very authentic game. So it portrays military warfare in a very accessible, like current military warfare in a very accessible way. So you have to achieve victory, you need to make sure that you're using your forces. You need to use combined operations, and that, I guess, it satisfies that.
It's
that
not
parameter, but
it's not black and white, right? Like it's a little bit in between. It's quite arcadey, but then also quite realistic, depending on what you're used to from other games, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. I would agree with that. If you're a regular RTS player, I think this is gonna come up as very realistic. if you're a war gamer, this is gonna come off as very arcadey.
Yeah.
So you could say that it's a very good middle ground, and I think the game captures that really well, and I had a lot of fun with that. So I need to say that me and Al had access to a preview version of the tutorial mission, and I don't think it's the first mission of the campaign, but one of the missions of the campaign. And I have to say that I was very impressed with the game, and I had a lot of fun with it, and it reminded me that both of the Wargame series of titles from Eugene, but also from Whirlwind Conflict as well. I'm not sure if you guys played Whirlwind Conflict.
Yeah, I was going to mention World in Conflicts because I think it's almost like and I know we use this spiritual successor title for a lot of games, but it almost seems to be a continuation of the kind of gameplay that you had in World in Conflict, which was that set in like the 80s? It was
set in in the early 90s, I think.
Yeah, late 80s, early 90s. So like the
prior to
Cold
the
War era. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this almost seems like a continuation of that, but of course a more modern continuation.
What I played that this reminded me of, it's not the same time period, but the gameplay I felt was quite similar. Sudden Strike. This is like a older, so it's a similar kind of tactics game. It was World War II, but you control units in similar way, and I had a lot of fun with that. So this reminded me of that. But I agree that it is a really nice middle ground between accessibility and feeling like it's a little bit more than just a video game. That there's some representation of reality in here.
So, Nuno, you said that you had a lot of fun with it in the time that you played Broken Arrow. So tell me what you enjoyed about it.
So I have played Eugene games before, the War Game series and the Steel Division games, and I enjoyed them. I also played Warno, which is their latest title, and I enjoyed them, but I always thought they were a bit too fast and a bit too arcadey for me, so they felt almost like too twitchy, too micromanagey, and there was a lot of stuff happening at once, and their campaigns were also not that good because they were mostly just skirmish, like randomly created battles. So what I enjoyed from what I played in Broken Arrow is that there seems to be a story-driven campaign like Whirlwind Conflict had, and I love that. Like you guys know, I'm not a big multiplayer kind of guy, so I really love when games have a campaign. And I really love the mission design they had for the mission we played, because it allowed you to experiment with a lot of different tactics in one single mission. So you could replay that plenty of times and always find a new way to overcome that challenge. And I think that's a good starting point to have a nice tactics game, which is a game that gives you some sort of freedom to achieve your objectives the way you want. So I could see a lot of potential with this, and I'm really hopeful that the rest of the campaign is not a disappointment and it continues this trend. So we'll see how it's going to come, but from the two missions we played, I mean, the tutorial was boring, right? So you just like, it had you moving a colonel or something like that around, so to show your fighting capabilities, but you're mostly fighting against static targets. But the battle itself, like the road to Kaliningrad, was a really good mission, and it was quite long, right? I think it took me over like an hour to finish. I'm not sure if it took over an hour, but yeah.
It was quite long, and I think when I first played the first mission, I kind of just got everything and just rushed them forward and ran straight into trouble because maybe didn't understand. And this is where I think the realism comes from it, because in modern warfare, I guess you can't just group all your units together and send them forward into the enemy. You've got to probe, you've got to plan, you've got to skirt, you've got to scout. You have to look for weaknesses before you commit your forces. And I really like that realistic element to the game. I mean, some parts not realistic, of course, and I appreciate there's no base building, which I think is fine in a game of this type. But the thing that I thought kind of broke it was the thing where you just drop supplies and then you can just park your tanks next to this strange block of supplies and it fixes them. It seemed to just kind of break the immersion a little bit. That did.
I think that's
made it almost too arcadey.
Oh no, I won't criticize the game for that, because I get what they're trying to say is that so the game is basically just a speed up version of Warfare. So I think they also explained this on the tutorial, which is the moment you drop supplies, like your crew, no, like it's an abstract concept in the game, but supposedly your crew is working on the tank and they're repairing the tank. But yeah, I can see, like, if the tank is almost exploding and it's fuming everywhere, it doesn't make a lot of sense to heal it back to full HP, right? It's stupid. So the tank would probably have to be ferried out of the battlefield, but that would be also too much.
What broke the realism for me was something completely different. The idea that NATO forces and Russian forces could go to war and it would be anywhere near even fight seems like crazy idea to me.
It's a good point, isn't it? It is a good point, but it's it wouldn't make for a very fun game. So I think you've got to give them some artistic license in terms of. I noticed that as well. I'm sure when I noticed there was a T-72 versus a
Abrams,
and I was just like, that's not a fair fight. That's not a fair fight. But
it is.
It is. In order, if we go right back to the start, we did the realism versus fun episode. If this was completely realistic, it would not be fun for the Russian player. It wouldn't be fun for the American player either, because it would just be a turkey shoot. But hey ho, Tim, you've taken this online, haven't you? What was your experience like?
Well, let's say I played it and I didn't play single player. So, I mean, I enjoyed the multiplayer quite a bit. It was, what I enjoyed from it is that there's a symmetry in the sense of the enemy's capabilities are the same as your own. And usually when you play against AI or a campaign mission, like, the enemy has like unfair advantage in terms of numbers, but they're not so clever. But then what I enjoyed with multiplayer is that, I mean, my opponents were like a decent amount of clever, and I could learn from the opponent as well in their cleverness. So I enjoyed that. Yeah, it was fun. And it's set up in such a way that you play with a team against an enemy team, and so it's kind of like a pick your lane kind of gameplay where you have your neighboring lanes. So this strip of land, like, okay, you take care of this and your allies take care of some other part of the map, and maybe you go over there and maybe they come over here, but it gives like a sense of like a wider scale of the conflict where you just take part in like a smaller part, and there's more going on around you, and that's kind of fun.
And I think on that point of almost like theatres of war, the one thing which struck me when I opened up the demo mission was just the scale of it. And I think, as Nuno says, it took about an hour to get through that mission, and it was a series of checkpoints that you had to capture before the armoured column rolled through to Kaliningrad. I said it right. I'm really impressed by myself. And if you zoomed all the way out and panned your camera around, it was such a huge area that it was covering. When you're playing the skirmish version or the multiplayer version, do you have the same scope? I mean, is there any information about map sizes for multiplayer on this?
The map is really large as well. The difference is though that there's control points in the center, like several of them, like sometimes I think I'm told 9 or 11 of them or something like this. And they're spread out, but mostly around the center. So you can try to flank the enemy by going all the way around, and you can do that, but it just takes so long because the map's really, really big. But it also gives a lot of space for your artillery to shoot from really far away.
There's been a lot said about the many different units. So you've got artillery, you've got aircraft, you've got aeroplanes and helicopters, you've got tanks, infantry, fighting vehicles, and also infantry. And when I first looked at Broken Arrow at some point in early 2024, I was really impressed by the whole idea that you would have really good engaging infantry fights, where you would require infantry to clear other infantry. But it just seemed to devolve into a bit of a tank fest. On this demo mission, there's buildings held by infantry. If you pour enough tank shots into it or enough machine gun into it, the infantry dies anyway. And it almost seemed like you didn't really need to bother with infantry. Now, whether that's just because that was the focus of that particular mission, was on the vehicles rather than more combined arms, it seemed like a bit of a missed opportunity to have infantry more involved.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with all these games, and it's my main complaint about Broken Arrow as well, which is like infantry just acts up like tanks or other vehicles, but they can occupy buildings. So they don't act like infantry; they just another unit, and they don't play like people would. Like they don't act like people. Like they go around on the open field. The only thing they can do is enter buildings. And if the war in Ukraine taught us something, is that infantry is still very much the queen/king of the battlefield, right? So you need guys there to make sure things get done and to occupy places. And this is the same problem I had with the Wargame and Steel Division guys. It's just a couple of guys just fighting at each other like 100 meters away, and the guy that fires first or that has the best stats wins, and it doesn't have a lot of tactics to it, right? It's just boring. They're just in front of each other shooting, and it's a massive contrast when you compare to the depth of systems you have when you're dealing with tanks and other vehicles, that they have subsystems of weapons. So tanks can throw smoke, they have special kinds of armor, they have like submachine guns and all that, and all these systems act independently, and then you just have infantry and they just shoot at each other and occupy buildings. I think it's very boring, and the solution I put forward to that was to have a cover system like Company of Heroes did, but probably on a larger scale, right? Because the game scale is very different from something like Company of Heroes. But I think that a cover system would probably help out a lot, because you then could use your infantry to flank infantry positions as well, so to suppress them, to fix them in place, so don't allow them to move. But yeah, they decided to not go that route, and I can see why. Probably a lot of micromanaging involved if you had those kind of systems, but I think it would take the game to a new level that other titles didn't went. But looking at that, aside from the comparisons we made to Whirlwind Conflict, I very much feel like this is another game from Eugene Systems, to be fair with that. I think the game is good, it's really good, it's very fun. It has amazing graphics. Like the graphics, it's probably one of the best looking strategy games on the market.
Do you think so?
Oh yeah, I think the graphics are amazing.
I thought that environmentally it was really good and very realistic, and you could look at the map and imagine that being the countryside or the outskirts of a city in any number of countries. But the units wise, I thought they looked
floaty. They look floaty, right? They look very light. The
look
animations
quite
are
cheap.
very.
Well, you're mostly looking at the icons anyway, right?
I don't. I like to zoom in to when they're fighting. I'm the kind of guy that likes to play this kind of game slowly and just enjoy the spectacle. But I think the graphics are very good. I don't remember
About what you said with the infantry and the multiplayer, my experience with it was that the infantry is extremely important for vision. That the tanks they don't see anything, and so you kind of need to put the infantry ahead of the tanks just to spot the enemy.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of the weapons on these vehicles have a longer range than what their vision is.
Yeah,
which is where you need to have those scouts. I mean, there was one of the tasks that was set in the demo was where you had to move the scout snipers forward. Do you remember that one? And it seemed to take ages, and you've got to avoid it. And it was such a change of pace to the rest of the demo, and I thought, I'm never going to micro these troops like this. No, this is it's almost like a large scale World War III, God forbid, simulator. You know what happens if NATO and Russia came to blows in Eastern Europe, and you're looking at quite high level in terms of you've got tanks, you've got all of these aircraft as well. It seems to be quite high level in terms of the amount of units that you could bring in. And then I'm spending an hour moving these 6 guys, whatever it was, across this field and avoiding BMPs. And it just seemed to completely change the pace.
That's why I have problems with that. It's just, why would you have those systems? Why would you make us like micro 2 snipers around a couple of forests, and then like the rest of the infantry gameplay is just so boring. I wish the infantry gameplay was a lot more involved than it is. But I can see your point, which is the game is supposed to be played from a very high level. So you're not supposed to be microing individual squads, and you're not supposed to be worried about that. But as someone that plays a lot of games, and I like to play my games at a very low level, so maybe this is my problem and not necessarily a Broken Arrow problem. I like that kind of control and detail, because it makes sense, right? If the rest of the game it tries to be so authentic, it's very jarring to see that infantry doesn't play as good as other as tanks.
It felt like a bit of an afterthought.
Yeah,
the infantry. So we must put infantry into this because infantry is really, really important to being authentic when it comes to simulating modern military. So let's put infantry in, but then they're underutilized and, as you say, limited in their abilities compared to the sheer amount of detail that's put into the vehicles is just out of this world. And then infantry are a bit like,
in the first couple of previews they had, I was under the impression that the cities were going to be much larger than they actually are in the game. Because if you play the war game series, like cities are very small. They're just a couple of buildings put together, and there's not a lot you can do there. But on the first previews of Broken Arrow, cities were really large, so you could occupy individual buildings. You could be moving your units across several buildings, or your infantry across several buildings, and use them to occupy better positions and to create ambushes. So I was under the impression that these guys are gonna make infantry a lot more important than they are on the other similar games.
Question: in the single player, did you get to buy which units you get, or did you just receive the units?
No. You can buy them using the points you get from capturing. But the units you could buy were pre-selected for you. But on the multiplayer, you're supposed to be able to create your own deck with the units you'd like. You're supposed to customize individual units. So I would like my tanks to have this and that add-on armor, or this and that anti-tank something, or anti-air system.
And that's a pretty cool thing. It's fun. Like, first you have to get used to all this, so you can't do that off immediately because you're like, what the hell is this? But once you get the hang of it and you start customizing things, it gets a whole new level of fun.
Yeah, I don't want us to come across as completely negative as we have done in the past, especially with New World Order, Anarchy, collapsed, and also Civilization 7. 2 games at completely different ends of the spectrum of the amount of money that's been used to create them, and both absolutely trashed by the Critical Moves team. This has all of the makings of being a really, really good game, and it is high on my wish list, and I believe it was the highest wish-listed strategy or RTS game as part of the Steam Next Fest from a couple of months ago. It's got such potential to be a fantastic game, so I don't want us to be saying that it's shit, because it isn't. I thought it was really good, and it's very easy to focus on the negatives. But there's a lot of positives in there.
Here's something that I really enjoyed is using the artillery. Like, I found the artillery to be very enjoyable in this game, and
very effective.
Very effective, and the visual effects, and like it just felt fun to use, you know. And especially in the multiplayer, there's like a whole thing about cat and mouse. So you keep an eye out of where the enemy sends their artillery barrage from, and then you deploy your artillery to shoot where that's coming from. But then you have to redeploy away from there soon after you fired. Otherwise, the enemy is going to shoot yours down. So it's like this little game that you play with your artillery and the enemy artillery. It's interesting.
And that's authentic military doctrine, isn't it? When it
is,
comes to artillery,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, you fire and move. You don't sit in one place and allow the enemy to zero in on where your artillery is. You want to get your hits and then get out of there, set up again.
Unless you're Russia.
And this is probably where the infantry comes in as spotters for your artillery, or aircraft as spotters for your artillery as well.
And the different kinds of artillery weapons available and everything, that's really, really fun.
So I never saw them as part of the demo, so what kind of things are we talking about?
Oh, like MLRS, I believe is the name, term for it. But like basically, like you can go for like very wide cluster ammunition, or very focused artillery and these kind of things, and you have like some really nice explosions. Those are what we play these games for, right?
Yeah. I thought the sound effects, the sound quality was really good, and hearing the tanks get hit and the impact noises, I was like, this is, with headphones on, with the volume up loud, I thought it was really immersive.
It is. Like you said, not trying to be negative, but I think the game is really good. Like, to be fair, like I'm probably gonna enjoy a lot playing it, because I also played the multiplayer that Tim was talking about, and they had a demo mission available also almost a year ago. I think the game has a lot of promise. I really enjoyed it. I think like the presentation is pretty damn good. Like the UI is really cool. The graphics are amazing. The sound effects are great. The mission design was really interesting. And like you said, Al, in the beginning, which is like you cannot just like, oh, let me roll my tanks here and I'm gonna steamroll this. But what probably happened was that you got ambushed, right? But if you took your infantry around on the ridge, if you put your infantry on the ridge and then you traverse the ridge with your infantry, so you'd be able to start spotting the enemy and know where they were. So then you could use your mortars to make sure that they were killed before you got there. So I think there's a lot of tactical depth in here to be had as well. So like, yeah, to be fair, I think the game is gonna be a massive success, because people really seem to enjoy it as well, from what I've seen around on YouTube and on comments.
Is there any information on the campaign? Because we played the Kaliningrad mission, which is said to be somewhere in the middle. Is there any further information on the length of the campaign, how many missions there's going to be, the backstory? Do we have any information about that?
I don't think so, but you're supposed to have a scenario editor on it, so you'll be able to create your own missions, and I'm really excited for that.
How heavy was the story in the campaign? Like, what was it? Just like, oh, here's your mission, or?
Very light. You had a couple of voice lines, and the guy said, "Oh, now you need to do this, you need to do that," and then, "Oh, that they're gonna counterattack, or the armored column is coming through. Make sure you protect them." So very, very light, but it serves its purpose. I would say it's very similar. If you played Whirlwind Conflict and you always had those icons of guys talking, so it's pretty much the same, I guess. And I prefer the games to be that way. I don't like to be interrupted with cutscenes whenever I'm playing.
But Al, you're a fan of Red Alert, right?
I am a huge fan of Red Alert, yeah, but I don't like cutscenes which appear in the middle of missions.
Thank you.
You know, because it's like what game was I playing recently where they did that? I can't remember what the game was.
Warcraft 3 does this quite a bit.
And like a scripted event came in, and I was just like, "What are you?" I was in the middle of doing something. Now I was right in the middle of doing something. What are you playing at? Don't take control away from me just when I'm starting to enjoy myself, because it just broke everything. And then when it came back, I'm like, well, you know, those units they weren't doing that. They were doing something else. And I think I lost units as a result. And I just thought that was really, really poor game design. So I don't want to be interrupted. I thought the Red Alert and Red Alert 2, not so much Red Alert 3, but certainly the first two games, the FMV was just fantastic.
Golden. It was golden.
Yeah, you know, absolute classic, you know. So I really do appreciate them, but there was never a time in those games where halfway through a mission they stopped you being able to control what you were doing in order to give you more information. You need to be fed the information, and this does it in quite as Nim says, quite a smart way, where it comes up at the bottom. It doesn't block your screen. It doesn't block what you're doing. They feed you the information, which is, I guess, quite relevant, without interrupting your processes. And that's a really smart way of doing that.
Yeah, because in a tactics game like this, where your units have some sort of continuation, right? If so, you bought those units, they were doing something like you said, so they were in this place for a reason, or I put them there for a reason. And if you're interrupted with a cutscene and then you just go back to, oh, let's just restart everything, so your units are all back on the road, or they're all back on their bases or whatever, it kind of ruins the progression. And then I myself at least start to become worried about what I'm gonna do next, because I don't know when the game is gonna reset my progress because it decided that it had to. So I'm very happy that they took that route. But also I suppose they're a very small studio, so probably they wouldn't have a lot of resources to do stuff, more elaborate stuff. I think the FMV wouldn't work because, like, Broken Arrow is a game that takes itself a bit too seriously, because it's trying to be serious, and Red Alert didn't. So Red Alert and FMV were a perfect combination for what it was trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, in order for you to have effective FMVs for Broken Arrow, you would need a Hollywood budget because of the seriousness of the subject matter that it's covering. This is a serious game. It's a real-time tactics game. There's some bits which are unrealistic, such as the dropping off supplies to fix your tanks. Some of the voice acting was a little bit jarring. I think when you select your Abrams tanks and heavy armor is on the field, and I was like, that tanks wouldn't say that. it's like you try to be realistic, and the heavy armor on the field. It's like, well, okay, but
I guess the unit marks are unnecessary tools. They serve more of a gameplay purpose to let you know that you selected the unit itself, and not necessarily to be realistic.
But surely I know which unit I've selected.
Yeah,
I've just selected it.
But if they're all clumped together, Like sometimes if they're all on top of each other, you don't know which one you selected. So I like unit parks a lot because they help me situate myself. So it's an acknowledgement that I clicked in it and I didn't misclick.
Okay, all right. And I'm not saying don't have them. I'm just saying that when I heard heavy armor is on the field, I thought I was selecting a Paladin tank in Command & Conquer Generals from 2003, not a realistic Abrams tank from 2025. And it's like, time's moved on for us to be relying on these quite cliched unit markers or voice markers.
It's I disagree. I disagree, but I had an amazing idea, which is Broken Arrow. With command.
You're entitled to disagree.
No,
I'm entitled to tell you that you're wrong.
Listen. Broken Arrow with Red Alert 2 units.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be fucking amazing of a game?
So, is there going to be modding support? I suppose that's the question, isn't it?
Oh, I hope so.
And you're going to learn modding in order to put Red Alert 2 units into Broken Arrow?
I won't. But if I did know how to do it, it would be on the way. So if anyone was listening to us and would like this idea, so take it.
Including things like Yuri and the Zeppelin.
And you could have like those blimps bombing everything. You have the
Kirov airship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the mind controlling Yuri.
Perfect. Einstein
maybe wouldn't work.
There, making an appearance.
I did really appreciate the scale. And I don't just mean in terms of the size, but I mean in terms of the range. Because in a lot of these games, a lot of real-time strategy or real-time tactics games, it's unrealistic in terms of you're almost point blank before you're in range. And here, I think it was one of the Bradley fighting vehicles just fired off this missile. And I was like, what? Is he shooting at that red dot over there? It just seemed to be so far away. And that was maybe a wake-up moment for me where I thought, this is different to the games that I'm used to playing. This is far more realistic, authentic, if you want to use Nuno's word, than the games which I'm used to. And it's going to be a welcome change of pace. After we finish recording this, I'm going to go and play that mission again, and I'm going to try and do it with a realism head on in terms of scouting, in terms of probing, and see how much fun I can have with it.
You know what's a great mindset to have when you're playing these kind of games? Just think so if I was there, would I charge head on into something that I don't know if there's enemies in there or not? And then your whole perspective on this kind of game tends to change about that, because before I started playing like this more, I don't like the word hardcore war games or something of the nature, but more realistic titles. My instinct was also to like make a stack of them, so just get all my units together and then just charge head on. But eventually you're going to realize that that's not going to happen, or it can happen once or twice, but you're going to lose a whole lot of units and then you won't be able to complete your mission. And then from the moment that you start to think like, oh, okay, so what would I do if I was there? So I wouldn't charge my tanks forward because they probably have an ambush waiting for me, so I need to locate where that ambush is. And how am I going to do it? I'll either use light infantry or light vehicles to that, and I wouldn't charge my tanks forward. I would probably try to destroy them first with artillery, and then I would take my guys forward, and I'll probably screen it first using infantry instead of taking the tanks. So the tanks are that they're gonna punch through the tougher targets, but they need to be protected as well. So yeah, the moment you start to connect all these dots, like the game becomes much more enjoyable because you're playing it like you're supposed to, and you feel a lot more accomplished because you start to feeling smart, right? Like I feel like a real commander there because I did something smart, so I used the upper ground in here, and instead of just Zerg rushing something.
You're applying real world tactics to a computer game. And this is a game that's going to allow you to do that. And it was such a joy to see, and Tim would have experienced this far more than what we have by playing the skirmish or multiplayer version that he was playing. The combined arms element of this game looks to be a standout feature when you compare it to its peers or games from around this time. Like other modern RTS games, this seems to be completely different in terms of its combined arms requirement.
I said, go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would compare it to like a really old game, like I mentioned earlier, Sudden Strike, which did something like this quite similarly, but like, I don't know, like 20 years ago. But this is just much more refined, much more well executed, I guess, version of that. And I kind of like what you said, because to me, all in all, in general, what I enjoy about strategy games is this feeling of like, oh yes, I'm so clever, I did this,
Yeah.
But you are so clever. You are so clever.
No,
we know this about
not
you.
always. not always.
You're the brains of the operation.
Not always.
Yeah, I think the moment you start understanding how the game is supposed to be played and how tactics are applied, it makes sense because I came to the conclusion that we've been conditioned to play games a certain way because like let's pick up something like Age of Empires. So like you get rewarded if you have a stack of them, right? So it can be countered with a couple of trebuchets or catapults and something like that can do AoE damage. But if you have 200 guys charging 10, like the 200 guys are gonna win just because it's 200 guys and they outstat the other ones. And in this kind of games, that tends to not work so well because it's somewhat realistic-ish. Because if you have 10 guys on a good position or in a fortified position, they can destroy 200 guys. Like if you have one guy on a fortified position and he's a fighter, he's probably gonna hold his own for quite a while. So yeah, I think Broken Arrow is the kind of game that does that very well, and a lot of that is also due to the combined operations, because you also feel smart because you're managing all these small pieces, so you're utilizing your forces to the full extent and just not using I'm using the triangle of strategy, right? So one bits another, the other bits another, the other bits the one in the beginning, and here it's a lot more nuanced and it feels a lot better to play. And I think other games did that before. So the Steel Division games, the War Game series of titles did that. The Warno also does that. Regiments, which is another title similar to this, does that as well. But yeah, I think Broken Arrow it's probably gonna be the best game in this weird subgenre, which is real-time tactics. With this kind of scale, because I don't know of other games that have this scale. Even more realistic war games don't have this kind of massive scale to them. I'm not sure if you guys saw, but I posted an image on the chat about how large a city can be. So I'm very interested to see if this is something that's gonna be making its way to the final version of the game, because it looks like a very interesting map with lots of fields of fire and lines of fire that you are supposed to take into consideration. You can see a lot of geographical details, so a lot of like small bridges or places you can fortify and hold together, and they can overview the whole city. It looks very cool.
So our listeners can just imagine the image that you've
guys, you can go to the Steam page, and it's one of the screenshots of a city. I think it's the only one there. So I mean, I'm sure always gonna have gameplay footage running on the background, right?
Oh yeah. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll make sure that at the exact moment where Nuno's talking about this image, it's there front and center so you can see it. So that's what he was talking about. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, Amazon, any of the other podcast services, just use your imagination. Map, bridges, stuff. I think that sums it up, doesn't it? Map bridges stuff.
Guys, I have a question for you. Still about the gameplay mechanics. So, since you guys are more traditional RTS players, did you notice anything different while playing with these restricted fields of fire and fields of view? So, what's your opinion on that? What do you guys thought about that?
Well, what do you mean exactly?
So, for example, I can go back to games like Red Alert or Age of Empires where units can shoot, like they can have gunfights across buildings. So, like it's like the bullets can.
Oh yeah.
You know, like they don't have fields of fire, or they're not restricted by that. So I'm wondering if you guys noticed that while we were playing, and if you have any thoughts on that.
There's fields of vision, and if you hold Alt and place your mouse cursor over a unit, it shows you what it can and can't see, and the things it can't see is in red. And I thought that was really, really cute the way, and I think that they introduced you to that as part of the tutorial mission with the two sniper guys running through the trees. If you hold Alt, and you can see what they can actually see, and you know when to make your move. I thought that was a really smart way of doing it, because most of these things, it's a circular. You get the occasional game where things will be blocked by buildings or blocked by a hill or whatever, but this took it to the next level in terms of you can't see through those trees. You can see up that valley, but you can't see over that ridge. And I thought it was really clever how it was done, and it takes us back to what was said at the start with I think it was Tim who said you need to use your infantry to move forward so that they can identify targets for you, because if they can see it, then your tanks can see it, or your artillery can see it, and that's one of the better, or one of the best features to come out of this game. And I think that's something that other games will be looking at and saying we should do that as part of our game. Because I thought it was really, really clever.
Yeah, a lot of games do that. That's why I was curious to know, because it's very fun to talk with people that have a very different strategy gaming experience than you. Because like this is, for me, it makes perfect sense, because like the other wargame titles already had that. But it's interesting to see when people who never saw this mechanic at work or never saw it to this level, how they interact with it, because it completely changes the way you play, because you can no longer just start hurling shells toward, oh, they're going to skip this building, or they're going to go over the building, or they're going to go through the building. And then, I can see every unit on the field, because you can't. Like, you're very limited in what you can see, and that change is supposed to change the way you move and the way you try to scout the field first. Yeah. Slowly, I'm gonna convert you into playing more hardcore war games.
Okay, any final thoughts on Broken Arrow, Nuno? Keep it short if you can.
I hope the game comes out soon, but I'm not sure when it's coming
June.
out.
June 2025.
It has a date. Oh, fantastic.
It doesn't have a date. It has a month. It has a release window of June 2025. So in a couple of months. So you hope it comes out soon. Tim, any final thoughts?
Not really. I said what I said. It's a fun game. If you like something in between casual and super realistic war game, like something in between, nice middle ground.
That's all we've got time for then, guys. So say your goodbyes.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, it was nice. It was fun. Thank you. Cheers.
Make sure you visit criticalmovespodcast.com. You'll find out all the ways you can get in touch with us on criticalmovespodcast.com. And please, if you've enjoyed us talk about Broken Arrow, send this episode to somebody else who you think will enjoy us talking about Broken Arrow as well. It's really appreciated. Thanks very much. Take it easy. Goodbye.